So today we have the privilege of diving deep into the VC landscape of the Philippines, featuring Franco Varona of Foxmont Capital. We will be exploring Franco Varona's journey, innovations, and vision for the future of venture capital in Southeast Asia.
I guess I'm going to start things off. You can go with the most basic question. So, feel free to share the story of your career, how it led to the role that you have today as one of the founders of Foxmont Capital. And yeah, feel free to run us through the whole roller coaster, share any feedback moments.
Okay, are you guys really ready for this? Okay, all right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. You know, it's actually one of the things I really love doing is actually speaking to students. I think I mean, there's just something different about speaking to students who have so much more to give, and so much time left in your lives, which is so inspiring on its own, right? Last week, for example, I spoke to a group of ISMers, like high schoolers, and then kind of shared the same stories. So it was nice to see how those words kind of inspired everybody. So my name is Franco Varona. I am the managing partner of Foxmont Capital Partners. So just a little bit on Foxmont first, and then I'll talk a little bit about my history. Foxmont was actually founded by 4 partners, but I'm just the lucky one that got to be managing partner for a variety of different reasons. Today, we've invested in 40 different startups in the Philippines, 40, and that's across like basically every industry you can think of, right? I was just counting earlier, you know, we've done F&B deals, right? Food and beverage, this is like pick up coffee. We've done social media, this is cool. We've invested in, you know, healthcare, Zenya. We've invested in, I don't know, InsurTech, right? RuralNet is a good example of that, which by the way, RuralNet is also a great example of an investment not in Metro Manila, that's actually in Cebu, or the founders based in Cebu. So really the mission of Foxmont up until this point has been to seed the Philippine startup ecosystem. We want to be there, we want to be the first institutional investor, we want to give support to all the founders that want to build a business focused on the Philippines. And now I can explain why, right? So I graduated from the international school here. I actually was born and raised in Vancouver, Canada, and I spent 3 years of my first 3 years of high school there. So in Canada, high school is actually 5 years. It's from 8th grade to 12th grade. My parents at that point, who were first generation immigrants to Canada from the Philippines, decided to actually move back to the Philippines. And I remember at that point, I actually didn't want to move back because I didn't know anybody. I mean, what was I going to do, like hang out with my cousins? And I didn't know anything about the Philippines. It was really very alien to me at that point. I was at that point very Canadian. I liked hockey, for example. I would sweat profusely when I got here. But one phone call from one friend who had previously moved here the year before said, hey, you should really try it out. There's just so much that you can learn in the Philippines. There's so many new people you can meet, et cetera. You can go to the bars when you're really young. You're like 15 and you can have shots of tequila. And I'm like, oh, cool. So I come. And I experienced 2 years of high school here at the international school. Loved it. Honestly, just absolutely loved it. For a lot of different reasons. One, for example, is that I went to an all-boys school in Canada. And I got to ISM and it was mixed, right? There's girls and guys. I'm like, whoa, there's girls here, cool. And that was kind of a nice little change. But the other is just meeting a lot of different types of people, right? From all different cultures, backgrounds. Today, some of my best friends and business partners are actually from that school. So for example, I told you guys that Foxmont was founded by 4 partners. Well, one of them literally was a guy I met on the first day when I arrived in the Philippines 27 years ago. Today, his name is Jesse Maxwell. He's the president and CEO of ASES Logistics. He's also a friend I've had for 27 years. Right? And one lesson I've learned about doing business in this country, the Philippines, is that you can't do it alone. Just cannot. Gotta do it with very trusted people. And we'll go into that a little bit later on. I want to go into university. Actually, well, this is kind of relevant. So I love my time in ISM so much then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try going to Ateneo, right? So my dad was at Ateneo, and my lolo was at Ateneo. I mean, it's like blue blood all the way through. Like, I know the chants, you know what I mean? Like, during one part of the season, I don't like LaSalle because of basketball, you know, the whole thing, right? And so I go, okay, I'm gonna take the Ateneo entrance exam, all these different things to get in, probably because of my dad, and I take one semester, and I can't handle it. It's a variety of different things. It's a cultural thing. It's actually academics. I thought were just very rigorous, honestly. And I actually wound up, I think, leaving that semester. And I already knew I was going to the States, by the way, at this point, but still, with a 0.0 QPI that semester. So I did like 3.5 months in Ateneo, couldn't hack it, wound up leaving for the US in January of 1999. Now I'm really aging myself. I spent 4 years in a very cold city called Syracuse University, at the Syracuse University. And then I graduated, spent the early part of my 20s in Washington, D.C., totally unrelated to finance, totally unrelated to fund management. I was actually more focused on international relations and politics at that point. I was basically an analyst for a think tank called the Woodrow Wilson Center, thinking about basically cross-border relations. Very relevant at that point because it was 2001, actually, 2002, so right after 9/11. Wait, was that before you guys were born?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Okay, I'm gonna speed this up because you guys like have no idea what I'm talking about. 9/11, you guys know 9/11. Okay, bad times. Anyway, after that, you know, I actually was basically couldn't stay in the U.S. because I'm a Canadian citizen, and they were like, guys, you're Canadian, you're not American, so get out of here. I'm like, okay, fine. Wound up landing a job in international sales. So I spent all of my 20s in international sales. What did that actually mean? I traveled to like places like Sao Paulo, Brazil, Istanbul, Turkey, Stockholm, Sweden. You know, for 5 years, it was 15 different countries that I wound up living in, and learned a lot. And who did I learn from? It was actually mostly CEOs and entrepreneurs in each of those countries, right? So I wound up meeting, guess, about 1,000 different entrepreneurs and CEOs during that time, learning how they were able to succeed in their own countries, right? And I thought it was very interesting, but I just had no idea how that was going to translate to what I would wind up doing. After that, I got tired of traveling. 28 years old. This is 2008. You guys are born early, right?
Yeah.
Okay. God. Okay. Someday soon it's gonna change. It's gonna be weird. 2008. I moved to. I looked for work in New York City. Worst time to look for work in New York City. Why? Well, first of all, I did get a job. It was with Yahoo. But a month later, I got it rescinded. Why? Because it was the global financial crisis. Like literally, papers flying out of windows in New York City because people were like quitting in mass and companies were closing down. And then I wound up in the Philippines. And if you've listened to any of my podcasts in the past, if you've seen any of my speeches, you know that I say this often, and it's true. I wound up in the Philippines in 2008 because I was supposed to pick up all this stuff from my parents. I was traveling, right? I was going to move to the States. And then my job was rescinded, so I was just here. So I wound up here in 2008 out of fear and desperation. That's a true story. It's not like I planned it, right? I'm not like one of these kids that graduated from Stanford, right? And then had my whole life ahead of me and like planned it. No, I was actually here and I was like, holy crap, what the hell am I gonna do now? 28 years old, you know, like, I'm still with my parents, okay, you know? And born out of that fear and desperation in the Philippines was this idea that maybe I should start a business. Right? I was like, okay, you know what? Like, I've just spent my 20s like going around the world. Like, I was never in a suit. I was never going into an office. Like, why would I do that now? So let me see if I can start something that, you know, that can help sustain my livelihood. And I wound up starting my first business, which is called Global Media, which is a similar service to what I was doing previously. Teamed up with international media to sell advertising abroad. We would hire kids from Latvia, and then send them abroad as well to do what I did. And that business actually wound up doing very, very well. Right? So much so that 4 years later, 2012, I get a call as I'm running that business. And that call is like, hey Franco, I have a friend, this is a friend of mine. Actually, it's Jesse Maxwell, my partner today. And he calls me up and he goes, Franco, I just got back from grad school. He graduated Harvard Business School in 2011. And he goes, I just got back from grad school and my friend wants to start a business in the Philippines and he needs a great entrepreneur, somebody very entrepreneurial that's Filipino that knows the market. And he's like, there's not too many entrepreneurs. And there weren't too many entrepreneurs back then, right? He's like, you know, I know you're trustworthy, you've done it. Do you want to give it a try? I'm like, dude, let's try it. Let's see what's going on, right? That friend turned out to be Anthony Tan, founder of Grab. Back then called My Taxi. He shows up and he basically, paints the vision of what he believes My Taxi at that point was going to be. And the Philippines turned out to be the very first international location that My Taxi grew into. So effectively, I became the very first international hire for Grab. In total, I was probably like employee number, anywhere between, I always forget this, it's probably anywhere between number 9 and 10, somewhere around there, globally of Grab. But number 1 or number 2 of the Philippines, it depends. You have to ask Natasha Bautista at 917 Ventures. She and I always kind of joke around about this because she and I were hired basically exactly at the same time. So I want to just diving into a brand new industry, operating in something I just had no idea what I was going to do. Like I just had no idea about taxis and the only thing I knew was I hated them because they were causing traffic, they were ripping people off, and it was just like there needed to be some order to this madness, especially when I had seen abroad, and I wanted to help affect that change. I wound up spending roughly 2 years with Grab, doing some great things. I hired the first 100 people in this country. I onboarded the first, let's say, 2,000 to 3,000 drivers in this country. I got, this is all for Grab Taxi, by the way. And it's funny, and I never thought, like last week, I mentioned this at the high school thing. I also, and I got applause for it, which I never thought I'd get, but actually, I actually wound up naming that company, so a lot of people don't know that, but Grab is actually from me. It was mytaxi.ph in 2012 when it was incorporated. And actually, if you check the SEC documents today, it's still mytaxi.ph, open parentheses, doing business in the name and style of Grab, close parentheses. There's a whole other story about why I came up with that, but basically at 11 at night, one April morning, I got a panic email saying we need to change our name now. And I put in a couple of like really jokey names like Relaxy and Chillaxy. This is actually true, huh? And then towards the bottom I put Grab and stuff, and Anthony replied and he's like, oh, I like Chillaxy. And then also, oh, and Grab is nice too. And then actually, thank God he chose Grab, huh? Actually, I don't know if it's thank God because I should have like patented that name or something first. But anyway, so I wound up naming that business. I left in 2014. I was tired, guys. I was exhausted. Like, this is one thing that people will, you'll always hear in podcasts, you'll always, see in movies. You always like this whole like dramatization of startups and working for startups. But the honest truth is that fast scaling startups like that, it is tough. Like, it's not, right? Like, I was in my early 30s. I was, I had just had a daughter. And, I was up at 3 in the morning training taxi drivers. And as you guys can probably tell, my Tagalog was terrible, but I had to do it. So I was training taxi drivers on how to use phones, smartphones, how to turn on a smartphone. Because they were still using Nokia, so they were like, sir, where's the button? Saan yung one button. And then, I had to like swipe and stuff. And then, what was the other thing? Oh, and then I had to teach them how to use the app. And then, like the rest of the day was like admin stuff, right? So I do admin stuff, and then at night, I have to deal with all like the customer complaints, right? So basically, I was spending, God, I'd say 16 to 17 hours per day, like just doing work stuff, and then getting home. And my family never saw me. I gained some weight. never lost it until like last year. And I was just tired. So in 2014, I said, thank you very much, Anthony Tan. I need to spend some time with my daughter. I need to kind of like just get away from it a little bit. And we had a nice kind of separation, right? So I went off to do my own thing. I spent 2014 to 2018 doing a variety of different things, right? So in the meantime, Brian Koo, he's very famous. He's known as Mr. Grab these days. He actually wound up running Grab, talking to the government, being in the news, all these different things, and doing a great job of it. And actually on the side, he and I were actually doing a bunch of other things together where we were actually trying to start businesses. So I set up a screens inside taxis, something that you see all over the place, right? In Singapore and in New York, everywhere, Japan. It was called AdBroker. I started, that was a Brian. I started a property management app, which I think is so important in this country. That was called Propster. That was also a Brian. And here I am, okay, thinking, okay, I just helped freaking name Grab, amongst other things. Here's Brian, super famous, running Grab at the moment. And we're out in the market trying to raise money, locally and internationally. And every single time we get on the call, it was like, sorry, Franco, no, it's too early. The Philippines, we don't understand it. It's too early. It's too this, it's too that, blah, 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 blah. So many excuses. Now I get it, right? I get it. For international funds, for Singaporean-based funds, they're like, they want to put their money where they understand the market. And the Philippines at that point was way too low, right? But there was a lot of frustration from my side. I was like, dude, guys, so you're just gonna put it all in Indonesia? Is that it? Like, is it all just gonna go to Gojek? Is it all just gonna go to, I don't know, Tokopedia? And actually the answer was, yeah, dude, I mean, what do you think? These guys are growing super fast. Do you have a Gojek in the Philippines? No, we don't. But it was actually out of that frustration that Foxmont was born. Because I would look around and I'd be like, God damn. Sorry, did I say that? My shoe, sorry. I'd look around and I'd be like, what is going on here? Like, Pinoys are just as smart as Indonesians, right? The population is just half the size. It's not, we're still the second largest population in the region. We all speak English, for crying out loud. Why is all the money going to Indonesia? At some point, the math doesn't work. The math is not mathing, right? Why? And I realized that actually what Indonesia had, and Vietnam at the time, that the Philippines did not have was really the big difference between all the markets and why the money was going there versus here. What was it? It was the presence of funds, independent funds in the country, right? Indonesia has like East Ventures, right? Indonesia has Alpha GWC. These are names that you guys can Google later on. Indonesia has AC Ventures. These are all funds that are based in Jakarta that basically have money that deploy and seed their ecosystems. Those funds then help their startups talk to the Singaporeans. Same thing was happening in Vietnam. They had something called Doe Ventures, right? That's one of them. And there's another one called Ascent Vietnam Ventures. And I'm looking around like, okay, cool. What's going on in the Philippines? And it's like crickets, nothing. Not to say there's not activity, right? You had Kickstarter, right? Which is doing a great job, I think. But still generally considered to be a CVC, right? A conglomerate, corporate venture capital. So investing a little bit differently than an independent. So that's when I was like, okay, crickets, that's interesting. And I was like, okay, if nobody else is going to do it, then I'm going to do it. I don't know how. I don't know anything about fund management, but what I do know is how to operate a business in this country, how to scale fast-growing businesses, and how to throw some support behind anybody that wants to put that effort in as a founder. I just needed to figure out how to raise the money and put together a fund around it. And thank God, and this part is going to be short, and because it's short, it's going to sound easy, but it was actually very hard. But thank God, I was able to find great partners who helped me build all different parts of the fund. The fund management side, I've got a great partner named Yelmer who did it in China. You know, the network here in the Philippines, again, a great partner with Jesse. You know, and then myself with origination, in other words, knowing all the startups, a little bit of the fundraising, kind of convincing people that A, the Philippines is a great country to invest in, and B, that our fund is the best fund to invest in, also the only fund to invest in at that point. And that's how Foxmont was born, 2018. And just as a note on the name, I wouldn't know the name that we were. It's actually like one of my other partners. But it's actually named after Fairmont Hotel. In fact, we wanted to call it Fairmont Capital, but there's like a lot of Fairmont Capitals out there. And instead, we just named it Foxmont because, first of all, we came up with a bunch of logos, and the fox is really cool. Then we just combined it to Foxmont. And quick and wily, right? Quick and wily, we can find the deals quickly and fast. So that's the whole history going all the way back, as far back as I can possibly go without telling you too many personal things. So did I complete that? I don't even remember what your original question was. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it was your full through your background. That's
Okay,
great.
cool.
Yeah, so that was basically perfect. I do want to go back to your grad experience. This is a pretty interesting story.
Yeah.
So I guess what you say was the biggest hurdles you faced while going on that journey?
The biggest hurdles of grab, yeah. You know, being a startup founder is very different than being a bootstrapped founder in a couple of ways, right? One, I think about a startup founder as somebody who wants to scale very, very, very quickly, and in order to do that, needs to access external capital, right? That's why you have fundraising rounds, right? Because you're onto a great idea, you know it's gonna freaking kill it, but you need other people to support you. And you need that money to scale to a certain level where that things just explode, right? In a good way. Whereas, you know, a bootstrapped founder is somebody that just wants to grow a business pretty consistently. You know, it's basically what we now call an annuity play, where you build it enough and then you make dividends and you pay yourself back, put some back into the company. You know, it's kind of slow. It's most of what our parents did is that, right? I was prior to Grab, I was basically a bootstrap founder. So when Grab came along, and Anthony Tan was like, hey, we gotta grow this business as fast as possible. Uber is coming, rocket internet is coming, we're gonna die. And I'm like, what? I mean, I don't know what we need to do here. And the first challenge was understanding that like the money will come from somewhere. And Anthony Tan would always tell me like, don't worry, I got this. You just have to think big, right? And I didn't know what that meant until the moment where I was like, Anthony, this is like very different from Malaysia. Malaysian taxi drivers, for example. So I spent the last 2 weeks in Malaysia in the early days to learn how they did it before I arrived here. And in Malaysia, they would literally just like flag down taxi drivers and then like install the Grab app or the My Taxi app and then say, okay, now use this. You'll make more money. And then the taxi drivers say, okay, and then they really start using it, right? And then they just install people in like gas stations and stuff to like help with troubleshooting. That seemed pretty easy. And when I first drew out the business model and the plan and projections for Grab Philippines, for my taxi.ph Philippines, I thought of it the same way. Like maybe just 5 people within, I think my initial budget was something like 10 million pesos for the year, right? And I was like, okay, I'll just hire 5 people, install some phones, blah, blah, blah. Little did I realize, again, back then, Malaysians had internet connection. They were, like even drivers were paying for their own internet connection already. In the Philippines, they were still using Nokias. They didn't even know what the internet was. This is 2013, mean, they knew it, but they would go to internet cafes, which didn't even exist anymore. So this whole thesis that, okay, I can just do whatever Malaysia did, totally out the window, right? I had to really manually push it. And what did that mean? It meant a couple of things. Insane to me. Like, I couldn't get my head around it until Anthony basically said, don't worry about it. One, I was like, dude, the market size is too small. There's not enough drivers that have smartphones. There's not enough drivers that have internet. You know what Anthony said? He goes, buy them all phones. I'm like, you want me to buy 3,000 phones right now? He's like, buy them all. And then I go, how about the internet? He goes, negotiate with the telco, get free internet. And I'm like, whoa. Like, again, you're thinking about, I was a bootstrap founder. I was thinking about like every cent on the dollar, how that translates to the business. This did not translate right away. And I was like, Anthony, how are we going to pay for this? I submitted my budget to you. It's 10 million pesos for the year. Buying 3,000 phones, that's already over budget. He's like, let me worry about it. And again, back then I didn't understand what venture capital was. I didn't understand the faith that VCs give to their founders. But sure enough, like a month later, Anthony's like, okay, I raised $5 million. And I'm like, what? Where did you raise $5 million? I think Vertex Ventures. And I'm like, and he's like, okay, so we're ready for the phones. I'm like, okay, let's do this. So we negotiated, bought phones. And basically it was supposed to be microfinanced to the drivers, meaning like they would pay us back daily. But honestly, in those early days, they barely paid us back. And I think we lost 30% of the phones the day we issued them. They just disappeared. And we just said, okay, just deploy more phones. We just kept on deploying more phones. And then on the Globe side, on the telco side, we wound up negotiating with Globe to give them a special deal. None of you remember this because you were way too young. But actually, when Grab first launched, there was a special deal where if you were a Globe user, you would actually get something like 20 pesos off your ride, every ride. Because that was a deal that we were giving in return for the free internet for the drivers. So we negotiated that way. So those were really difficult things that I couldn't get my head around in the early days, right? Other challenges, my development was crappy, it still is. And I had to talk to drivers, hundreds of them, at 3 in the morning. That was very challenging. Some client issues were insane, right? There was this whole, none of you remember this either, but there was this whole issue about like passengers that were like claiming that the drivers had like some sort of like wet cloth that would make the passengers pass out. There was like this whole scary thing where I had to run investigations. I was talking to the PNP. I was like, it was. Anyway, long story short, it turned out not to be that. It turned out to be the LPG tanks of the taxis that made people dizzy. But there was a rumor going around that it was like Grab drivers were like making people pass out on purpose. And those early stage things that you just need to deal with. Not to mention the fact that this is a funny story. I'm the one who set up the Facebook account. I'm the one who set up. So it must be because I'm talking so much that I killed everything. I'm the one who started the Grab account. I'm the one who started the Instagram account. Yeah, and you know what? The Grab, the Facebook, I remember I was still managing it. I didn't have social media management. And it was so hard to communicate to the passenger that all you had to do is download the app and book. Back then, it was not a normal thing. People would still call, right, to reserve. So actually what wound up happening is I would open the Facebook every day, and there would be literally Facebook messages like, hi po, please pick up sa hospital, sa drop off. And I'm like, please download the app. Ano po yun? Please pick up sa, and I'm like, okay, you know what, we gotta do better with the marketing here, and kind of get that across. And that took 6 months, 7 months of like really just kind of fine-tuning our marketing, getting in touch with our customers, understanding their needs. And once that flywheel started, people got interested, people got hooked, and then it started kind of really moving. And then I left. Actually, when it got easier, I thought, what the hell, right? That's crazy. But yeah, those were some of the big challenges that I faced as the Grab GM.
Oh yeah, thanks for that, Franco. It's a really cool story. You did mention something really quickly earlier. You mentioned Rocket Internet. So I'm familiar with Rocket Internet, but maybe you want to share how Rocket Internet operates and the reason why you guys are in such a rush with Grab to avoid Rocket coming in.
So Rocket Internet is basically a German, I guess they're like they're not an accelerator, they're like a venture builder, right? We all know what venture builders are today. They have a centralized support system, they have entrepreneurs in residence that build out businesses and then they deploy those businesses in the hopes that those businesses can raise a lot of money on its own and then kind of spin out and then the venture builder keeps equity, right? Because they were the early ones that supported it. And actually ideated. A lot of people don't know Rocket Internet actually came up with this concept of venture building. And the very, very early days, today it's not like this anymore, but in the very, very early days, it was very clear that Rocket Internet, and they even said it, they basically took examples from the US, like Amazon, for example, and then they venture built their own version of it in Germany, and then deployed it to emerging markets like the Philippines. And actually, honestly, Lazada is exactly that. Lazada was actually venture built by Rocket Internet and then deployed to all parts of the world. And in some places it took off, right? In the Philippines it took off, in Southeast Asia it took off. In some places it didn't. Where it died, they just let it die. Where it took off, they're like, oh cool, let's raise some money. Raise some money. And then eventually they're like, oh cool, let's sell it. Sell it to Alibaba. I mean, that's basically exactly the story of Lazada today, right? They're entrepreneurs in residence. The people that they hire to run these businesses at the country level are usually like very smart, very aggressive, like Germans, Spaniards, Europeans mostly, from like McKinsey, from great schools. Really, mostly good people, right? Like 99.9% great aggressive people. But their job is really to arrive in an emerging market and just win it at all costs. Get out of the way everybody else. We're going to win that market, and then we're going to raise money, and then we're going to kick everybody's butt, and it's done. So 2012 comes along, and that's when I'm hired for Grab, or mytaxi.ph, and it's just around the same time that Uber is taking off in the US, right? I mean, honestly, right? I think it was maybe about a 6-month difference, delta, between when Uber launched in the US and when Anthony Tan launched in Malaysia. Using the Uber example, Rocket Internet basically decides that they're going to launch their own version, which actually was called Easy Taxi. That's what it's called. It's called Easy Taxi. Does anybody actually remember? Yeah, that's right. Nobody remembers Easy Taxi because we beat them. Haha, Mario. Sorry, the guy that ran his thing was Mario for now. If you're watching this, haha. And actually, what was great about it, and I use this as an example today, is that Anthony used Rocket Internet and their pending entrance into the Philippines as like fodder, as like the way to motivate us to like go fast. Like every day I get like an email from Anthony. Rocket Internet is coming! Like, Easy Taxi's gonna eat us alive! They've got so much money, we're gonna die! Gotta hurry, guys! And really, it worked. It really worked, right? And actually, this is one of the things that I tell our underlying portfolio today. Is like, literally, imagine or not, imagine for real, find a bad guy. Find a bad guy. If you want your team to like, rally around something, come together, and just like work really fast towards a mutual goal. One of the best ways to do it is really to have like, again, imagine I'm not a bad guy. And that's what Anthony Tan did. So anyway, to answer your question, Rocket Internet deployed a ton of different businesses. Some of them we had no idea, right, that we're gonna become very successful. Zalora is another one, by the way. So Zalora, Lazada, are two very successful examples in the Philippines. And if you actually think about it, going back to what I said about founders, great founders were brought to the Philippines with those two businesses. So Lazada was actually run by a guy named Inanç Balci, who's a Turkish guy who still lives in the Philippines today, now runs another fund called Crystal Ventures, right? But Zalora was actually brought by two Pinoys. One was Brian Koo, right? You've heard me mention his name before. The other one is Paulo Campos, the guy who runs High Numbers. Out of those two businesses came a bunch of other people that actually even Foxmont invested in. So like Locab, which is one of the logistics startup that we invested in, basically Zalora founder. E-Tailing, also from Zalora. Cravers, also from Zalora. Yeah, I mean, what can I say, right? Great business to learn how to be super aggressive. That's Rocket Internet.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I once read an article that basically described Rocket Internet as Germany's like modern way to colonize the third world. So that's an interesting take on it as well. So yeah, I guess moving on, you did actually write an essay, a really nice essay, around 18 years ago on why you have hope for the Philippines. I guess for a bit of context. So this essay was a direct reply to a Korean student who basically had a critique on why the Philippines hasn't grown as much in the time that Korea really grew. I mean, maybe you can talk more about the essay that you directly replied to, so I think we give better context, and also what you meant by that, and how have you seen it? How have you seen that evolve in the past, 18 years?
Yeah. Cool research, thank you. It's pretty funny, back then. So first of all, just to give you context, that email went viral it was actually 2003, if I remember correctly, 2004, so 21 years ago. I was just out of university, and it went viral. Now, if you think about it, that's pretty freaking hard to go viral when there's no Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. How did it go viral? Like my mom basically forwarded it to her. You guys don't even know what this is. Do you know what a Yahoo group is? Yeah. Okay. So Yahoo group, right? It's like where old people basically communicate with their other old people, right? Like, oh yeah, my classmate from SDC 68, like did you reply? That's basically how it went viral. I wrote an email to my mom, and my mom forwarded it to her Yahoo group. That members of those Yahoo group, which is basically literally class of 68 or something, then forwarded to other Yahoo groups and other Yahoo groups, and then eventually my email got out, and I was getting emails from all corners of the world, different parts of the Filipino diaspora, Filipino Americans, Filipinos in Dubai, Filipinos in Singapore, kind of responding to it. It was pretty amazing. So some further context, basically right before that, my mom had forwarded me an email, and just as kind of older Filipinos do, she basically said, with the forward it said like, so true, so sad. I remember so clearly. So true, so sad. And underneath was actually a letter that was written like an opinion piece by a Korean student who was actually studying. In retrospect, by the way, now I think of that when I read that letter, I'm like, okay, I get it. The student he was really trying to be helpful. He wanted to make some comparisons and show how we could really be like Korea, right? But at 24 years old and being a little bit aggressive, I read it and I was like, F this kid. Like, forget this kid. Like, I don't like this kid. He's like insulting us. So I actually wrote a letter to my mom saying, this kid has no hope. This kid is like, why does he have to be so pitiful about the Philippines? Like, this is why I have hope for the Philippines. Literally, I call it why I have hope for the Philippines. And I basically said, in short, and you can Google this. You have to Google like why I have hope for the Philippines and my name to find it. By the way, just not that I've Googled it like a bunch, but that's how you have to find it. But in summary, I basically write about how I know there's a whole generation of kids that were my age that were being educated abroad, being educated in Manila, the South. That we're working very hard to kind of give back to the Philippines. I said, I know that this is going to be the case. I know, that we're going to, this new generation of Filipinos that are going to be able to give back. That was the whole point. And sure enough, at the very end, I'm like, I'm going to be one of them, right? I know this because I am going to be one of them. We're going to be one of them. And you know, full circle moment, I think about it now, and holy crap, it actually happened. Like, I didn't realize this. Again, you heard my life story earlier. I basically stumbled into Foxmont, but when I look into that letter, I'm like, oh my God, I actually made that thing come true, right? But there is, right? The whole thesis is that, like, yeah, I get it, right? Like, our parents, well, actually, your parents are probably close to my age, but my parents, you know, grew up in a time where it was a little bit desperate, right? It was a little bit hopeless, and there were a lot of people that moved away, including my parents. And you know, you get that question a lot, like, oh, you know, like first-generation immigrants in the States will be like, oh, why would you want to go back there? Why would you know, the Philippines is like hopeless, it's like full of corruption, blah blah blah. I saw it differently, and I see it differently today, right? Like, I think about it this way. I grew up in Vancouver, but I choose to live my life in the Philippines today, right? Why do I do that? It's very simple, right? It comes down to being a big fish in a small pond, right? I know that the Philippines is way more people than Canada, right? Actually, the Canadian population is 35 million. The Filipino population is 117 million. So theoretically, the pond should be bigger in the Philippines. But the reality is, guys, you know, we all operate in an extremely small pond and have the ability to affect much bigger change where we are right now than in economic, right? And I've always thought that. Like, you know, when I think about like my peers, my friends' lives in Vancouver, where they are today, and what kind of effect I've been able to, sort of changes I've been able to do in the Philippines, it's like night and day, right? I've got my friends in Vancouver that are like, you know, branch managers of banks, right? VPs of real estate firms, you know, like still very, very valid things, very good livelihoods. They're probably living better lives. I mean, they're going to like, you know, they're going to the beach every day, you know, they're done at 5 o'clock, like it's very comfortable for them, right? But I look at what I do now, and I'm like, holy crap, you know, raise the fund, $25 million, 40 entrepreneurs, 525,000 new people with new income because of Foxmont's investments into startups. And I'm like, there's no way I could have done this in Vancouver. There's no way I would have been able to arrive, even me being born there, knowing people. There's no way I would have been able to arrive there and start this whole thesis of Foxmont and raise the money and invest in Vancouverites and then find avenues to give 525,000 Vancouverites more income. Anyway, they don't need it. But in the Philippines, I was able to do that in 6 years. This is the big fish, small pond phenomenon. That all of us here, all of you guys watching, or the one person that's watching, I don't know how many people are watching, this is what we can do, right? This is the ability that we all have in this country, right? And that's the message I send to a lot of like philams and a lot of like, honestly, it's mostly philams because I go to the States a lot. I'll meet with like philams, you know, that are working there at Goldman Sachs. I'm like, guys, it's cool that you're working at Goldman Sachs. It's cool that you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but what is the change you're making? Are you just making other people rich? Like, are you just making rich people richer? Are you making rich white people richer? Right? Is that fulfilling? I don't know. Maybe to them it's fulfilling. But to us, what should be fulfilling, what is fulfilling, is helping out our fellow Filipino. And we can do that. We are big fish in a small pond.
Okay. So yeah, thanks for that, Franco. That's great. ASES a great meeting. I'll send it in the GC later as well. So I guess for the next question, this is more central to Foxmont. So you did touch a bit about this earlier and exactly what problem drove you to start Foxmont. But what do you see as the potential that you guys saw in the Philippine startup space that led to the founding of Foxmont Capital?
I mean, simple, right? You look at Southeast Asia and you look at demographics. You look at, and by the way, you guys, I think mostly know this about the Philippine venture capital report. We spoke about this earlier. That's the reason why we come out with the Philippine Venture Capital Report, because I feel like a lot of people don't know how exciting the demographics and the macro trends of the Philippines are. Just don't know it, right? But basically, what I understood back then was, again, Vietnam actually has a lower, smaller population than us, but they were getting more investments than us, right? Indonesia, okay, they were making all the investments. Thailand wasn't, and the Philippines wasn't. And there was definitely extreme frustration as to why that was. And I gave you guys kind of the sample of like ASES Ventures and Altitude VC and all these funds that are based domestically in Indonesia and in Vietnam. But the other side of it was I saw that actually, for example, Thailand, which if you think about it, much more developed than us, right? They have good infrastructure, good internet, they have very robust industries. Like theoretically, you think there should be great startups that come out of there. But I mean, can anybody name a great Thai startup? No, you can't name a great Thai startup. You know why? There's none. Sorry, Thailand. But there's no great Thai startups. And why are there no great Thai startups? Because there are no funds. There are no independent venture funds in Thailand. Actually, this is a secret between us and you, probably. If I were to set up another fund internationally, I wouldn't do Vietnam, I wouldn't do Indonesia, I wouldn't do Singapore. I would do Thailand. Because that's where you find opportunity. You know what I mean? That's where you find it. It's because they don't exist. And so that frustration of seeing that and that clarity of knowing what is necessary in the Philippines, that's what it is. It's like Foxmont. And by the way, also knowing that like we're just great entrepreneurs here. I mean, by 2018, and again, I'm not sure if you would all remember this, but by 2018, we had some interesting exits for some great startups, right? So we had like Coins.ph, for example, which today is run by a guy named Wei Cho, but was founded by a guy named Ron Hose, who moved here from California, loved surfing, and started this whole business that's like focused on crypto trading, and eventually more than that became a wallet. And he found a great exit. He actually sold to Gojek. And then there was another business. Maybe he might not want me to talk. But anyway, there was another business that actually was in group buying, like Groupon style, that actually had another great exit to a Japanese company for like tens of millions of dollars. So I knew that there was actually some opportunity in this country, but the entrepreneurs just needed more capital. They needed somebody domestically that can verify the businesses that they were doing to the third party, to like the Singaporean funds and stuff. And if it wasn't going to be anybody else, it might as well be me.
I see. Yeah, no, thanks for that story. It's really cool. So, I guess like when you think about it, if you look at when Foxmont was started, it was almost the perfect time to put a big startup ecosystem. I guess when you map it out, because like there were earlier VCs that started maybe as early as 2012 to like Kickstart, and then Google was starting to get active. But back then we just saw more of like bigger companies getting started. Since we saw Grab, Shopee, Lazada, and then maybe like Unplus in 2016, that's when they were forming in. And then in 2017 we saw PLAX. And then 2018 Foxmont started. Then we saw like a huge surge of these B2B startups, all these startups getting into YC. So was there like any particular shift that we saw like in 2017 to in 2018 in terms of macro trends, outside just the lack of support in capital, that led you to the decision to start Foxmont?
No. One can. I'm not gonna. Okay, I will. I'll say it. You can literally draw a freaking line from how this ecosystem blew up. Right? There's literally you can look at 2018 as that moment. And only one thing happened in 2018. What happened in 2018? Foxmont was founded, man. We don't know. Foxmont was founded. And I think that just proves the thesis, right? Now later on, of course, after 2018, a lot more happened, right? So 2020 pandemic, I will attribute a lot to the pandemic, right? And again, if you've ever heard any of my podcasts or the stuff I've said on stage, like that really was the digitization of our country, right? The way I say it today to people is like, it's like the Avengers, and when they finally beat Thanos and they snapped half the population back into reality. That's basically what the Philippines was. We were all like in this black space until 2020, and then snap, we're all online. Boom. Gcash, right? We're all downloading Gcash. Our internet is so much better all of a sudden. It's cheaper. Like things are faster. You know, we're starting to get websites that serve us more. We're starting to order way more. I don't know if you guys have ever looked, I've done it because I'm nerdy, I guess, but I actually looked at my Lazada shopping history, and I realized that before 2020, I had only ever ordered like 5 times. And it was like for like phone cable wires, right? And today, since then, I've ordered something like 250 times across a variety of different things. And that's probably the case for everybody. So in other words, what the pandemic forced us to do while we were all sitting at home, indoors, trying to figure out our lives, was it forced us to go online. And that's what I tell all outsiders. I'm like, guys, we have this great young population, right? You guys know this. You're basically the average age of the Filipino. How old is everybody here? 21. Okay, you're a little younger. You're 21, okay, so you're like 3 years younger. It's 24. But that makes me like double the age. It sucks. But you're basically almost the average age of the Filipino. You're gonna live in a lifetime that is way more connected than when prior to. I mean, you were 17 when the pandemic happened. Was it 17, 16, somewhere around there? So for the rest of your lives, you're gonna have this great convenience of being able to use Gcash. You're never gonna have to experience going to an ATM on the 15th or 30th and no money there. Did you guys know that was the case before? Yeah, that was literally the case. 2020, let's call it, actually, March 2020 was when we all went into lockdown. So one great example was literally every ATM, everybody pulled out all the money, like the day before we were about to lockdown. But the actual behavior of the consumer before that, the Filipino population, was that on the 15th and 30th of every month, which is payday, you would have to go to the ATM super early to be able to pull out money. Why? Because everybody else is pulling out the money. Because they're going to pay bills, they're going to pay the restaurant, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't happen so much today because everybody uses Gcash. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So thanks for that. So I guess an interesting stat I saw the other day to give context of the growth. The number of digibank users in the Philippines in 2019 was only 4 million. That number jumped up to 12 in 2022. So just in 3 years, what 20 years of work did, or probably maybe like a decade worth of work on digibanks, only saw growth of 4M. And because of the pandemic, it basically tripled. And that's basically like a similar trend, like Franco was mentioning, across everywhere, which is really cool. So I guess for my next question, what is Foxmont's playbook for evaluating startups? How do you guys look at a startup and say, hey, this is a good startup or this is a bad startup?
So I don't know if we ever actually look at something and say this is a bad startup. I mean, it's just like not good practice. You always want to look at things. You always want to give, like the benefit of the doubt, right? That's for sure. I mean, definitely as a VC, you want to be a contrarian a little bit. You want to be like, okay, all right. I mean, obviously this person is putting a lot of effort into this for a reason, right? So it's really hard to like look at something and be like, this is insane. You really have to, they're putting the effort to send a deck, they're putting the effort to put together the deck, they're putting the effort to put together a business that at the very least what Foxmont can do is actually put the effort to understand the business. And we do that every Monday. We have an origination call every Monday morning at 10 o'clock. We literally go down a list of all the startups that have sent us emails or all the startups that we've seen out in the wild and evaluate every single one. Very quick. Sometimes it's quick, like 5 minutes, but it's still like, okay, why is this the problem, right? Now, for the ones that we put a little bit more effort into, that we were like, okay, this could have some legs behind it. I would say that the first core thesis of Foxmont is that we don't necessarily just invest in like groundbreaking ideas, right? Not innovation. I always say that we like to invest in solutions, not innovation. Right? Innovation, when a lot of people think of VC and when a lot of people think of startups, they think about it as like the context of the US. So people are thinking about like, you know, electric vehicles, you know, like mission to Mars, you know, like AI, like groundbreaking stuff that nobody's ever thought about ever before that could change the world in a heartbeat. That is basically what VCs in California, Sand Hill Road, are investing into. They're investing into groundbreaking, innovative products. But that's also because the US has the system in place to be able to foster these types of founders. Right? These founders came from other startups, for example. These founders, you know, have spent, they've worked in incubators, they've worked in VCs. It's a very mature ecosystem over there. In the Philippines, we're not that mature yet. I mean, just frankly, we're an emerging market. We're young, like I said earlier, and we need time to build out those types of things. Right? We need time to build that. In the meantime, our population really needs stuff. We just need it. You know, it's a kind of a standard trend, right? Any emerging market will go through digitization in exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. First is digitizing your money. That's Gcash, right? And a little bit of PayMaya now, and a little bit of, you know, wait, let me see, show of hands. Who uses Gcash? Okay, it's like, oh, sorry, right? Okay, that's basically, who uses PayMaya? Okay, PayMaya, okay, that's about representative as well. What about GoTime? Okay, GoTime, okay, cool. So there you go. How about Uno Bank? Uno Bank? No? How about Salmon? Ah, okay. Is that because you interviewed about that? Nice. Good. You did a good job. Anyway, so basically, just a combination of me saying that was like 100% right? And that's the first thing that will always be digitized first is our money, right? I mean, you know, I think about it as really the size of my wallet, which is tiny. Today, it's basically made to just hold credit cards, right? And it's like one bill. But in the old days, I would have like a super fat one that would have like multiple bills. Like I'd be so nervous if I left the house without any cash. Today I don't give a crap. I just use Gcash, right? But anyway, the first thing is digitizing your money. And then you digitize goods, right? You start ordering more online. We've gone through this already with Lazada and stuff. And even within that, that's when you start thinking about things like vertical commerce, right? You're thinking about like vertical specialization. That's like edamame, right? We give birth to like, do you know we give birth to like 1.5 million babies per year? 1.5 million babies. That's so many babies that it actually drives our average age down. 2 years ago, our average age was 25.8 years old. Last year was 24.4 years old because we gave birth to so many babies. Think about it, that's such a natural thing to invest in, right? 1.5 million babies, rapid digitization of our population, and a mama, right? You can see how you connect the dots of that. So it's solutions that we're always thinking about. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking. Maybe there's some groundbreaking innovations within that solution, but it should just answer a need immediately. And from there, that's kind of the core of what Foxmont looks into, right? How does this make the consumers' lives easier? How does this make businesses' lives easier? How does this change the Philippines in a good way, right? Another good example, by the way, that's a lot of people probably don't think about is like we invested in something, a business called SolX, which actually came from Montenegro. How did you guys do that? And founder Serge, you know, what does he do? They do energy efficiency, right? So they basically help small businesses drive their energy costs down, right, in the Philippines. And if you think about it, the Philippines is one of the most expensive electricity generation in the world. We're in the third world, right? We're in the emerging market. So it makes sense for us to invest in trying to make it cheaper for businesses to run their business, driving down their costs by 30%, by the way, thus making their manufacturing costs competitive with like Thailand, Singapore, very competitive in Singapore, by the way, with Thailand, with Indonesia, with all the other countries. So again, core solutions, that's one thing. Second is obviously are the founder themselves, right? I mean, the founder themselves has to have at least some sort of knowledge within the industry that they're trying to attack, or something adjacent, right? I mean, maybe they're a consultant, and that's great because consultants kind of have access to a lot of different industries. But at the very least, they have to show some sort of knowledge, industry knowledge of whatever problem they're trying to solve. Right? I think a combination of those two makes it much stronger case for Foxmont to start looking into it more deeply.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really cool. So I guess what you highlighted, right, focus on solution over innovation, which actually brings me to my next question, where Peter Thiel talks about this concept of like 0 to 1 and then 1 to N, where 0 to 1 is more innovation-centric, where you're actually trying to create something that hasn't existed before, or hasn't even been applied to a certain vertical before. And then where N to 1 is like where, I guess, more in the case in the Philippines, where you're seeing like the latest trends abroad, what people have been doing in Indonesia, for example, and then you're applying it in the country similar to what Pick Up Coffee did. So, I guess, what would you say, if you're an aspiring coffee here, what is the angle to actually doing something from 0 to 1 in the Philippines? Like, how can you go about doing that, and if it's even worth doing? And I guess the next question would be, what would be better? Although you did kind of tackle it earlier, maybe you can go more into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. I think Pick Up Coffee is a very good example of this, right? So Pick Up Coffee, if you think about it, a lot of people will say that it's basically just a copy paste, right? I mean, it's like, okay, there's already this in China, Luckin Coffee. There's already this in the USA, Dubon Coffee. There's already this at that point, Singapore had Flash, and Indonesia had Kopi Kenangan, and a bunch of others. Foray, I think is the other word it's called. But I think what's important before all of that is actually market validation, right? So a lot of people don't realize, I don't know if you all know this. First of all, another question. Does anybody drink tea here? Okay, how about coffee? Less? Okay, but roughly the same. But you know what? The Philippines in general is not a tea drinking nation, right? I mean, it's not offered to you in offices, in boardrooms. It's not available. It's usually 3-in-1, right? Or at Starbucks. So actually, the Philippines is the 5th largest coffee drinking nation in the world, right? On a per capita basis, we drink 2.5 cups of coffee per day, which is much more than Indonesia, much more than Singapore. Everybody. Actually, it's the 2nd largest in Asia after Japan. So I think it's not just a copy paste, right? That's the short story of it all. It actually has to come from market validation. You actually have to make sure that whatever you're coming up with is going to be accepted by the market before you run that business. You can't just like blindly say oh, you know, actually here's a great example. There's an app there's a business, a service in the U.S. called GoPuff. It's not about vapes, by the way. It's really like or Puffco. Anyway, it's one of the two, GoPuff or Puffco, and it's actually quick commerce. This business is now worth something like $55 billion. But that you can't just copy paste the quick commerce business and then bring it to the Philippines. Like nobody's going to care about like getting cigarettes as fast as humanly possible, but pay 25% higher. But in the US, they want that stuff. Maybe because they're lazy, I don't know. Maybe because they're just on their couch watching football, I don't know. But they want to be able to get something within 20 minutes, but they'll pay a premium. But in the Philippines, that's not going to work. You're not validating the market, right? So before launching, before getting from 0 to 1, N to 0 should really be like, okay, our common sense check. Is this something that this market needs and wants to recover?
Yeah, thanks for that, Franco. So I guess for the next question, Foxmont, as you mentioned earlier, just published an annual report. So I guess maybe a bit of a teaser to the annual report coming out this March. What would you say is the future outlook of the Philippines, both from the consumer tech side and also from the B2B app?
Cool. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak about this. We're always very excited. We actually launch the report every March, and it's usually in line. By the way, and you're all invited in the Build Festival. Have you ever heard of the Build Festival? Okay, cool. So the Build Festival will be held again in the Neo Building in BGC, March 25. It's free, right? Just walk in basically, I'm sure you'll start seeing ads And that's really where we launch it. So we're coming out with I think it's our 5th or 6th annual VC report then. Amongst other things, there's going to be a lot of great speakers. Pavel of Savage should be there. York of Bill Ease, Jojo Manolos, Roland Ross, I'll compose myself. I mean, it's all-star lineup. It's going to be cool. Crap, I just accidentally called myself a star there. It's crazy. Anyway, the VC report this coming year is going to be pretty interesting. I was telling you earlier that actually what we're trying to explain is the rise of the middle class, right? So a lot of people don't realize this, but the World Bank has validated this. And I sat in the World Bank thing like 3 months ago, where everybody else was in a suit except me. I was in a polo shirt, which I love to do. And they were all saying how actually we're entering into the lower middle class globally. That's a big change. I mean, remember that like our parents, my parents, me even, grew up in a country that basically was considered to be like the poorest of the poor. The poorest of the poor, right? Like Africa poor. Sorry, Africa. But like not great. And to enter into lower middle class, that says a lot, right? About what we can spend, what we can do with that money. First of all, you know, there's a huge swath of the population now that doesn't need to just go table to mouth, right? Like they don't need to like pay something, eat, and then can't pay for anything else. There's actually enough disposable income to do other things. So actually what we're doing is we're studying that. We're seeing there's this thing called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure you guys have studied it. So there's this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're saying, okay, where within this Maslow's hierarchy of needs are the Filipinos going to spend more? It's basically an attempt for us to spark more entrepreneurship, for you all to think about, okay, how do I service the Filipino? What kind of businesses can I start? We're going to talk about that. We have 2 industries that we're going to do a deep dive on. Agri-tech, which we think is going to be super important moving forward. Health tech, which we also believe is going to be very important. Some crazy numbers, right? Like I think there's only 0.73 hospital beds per Pinoy, right, in this country. So it means that a higher chance than not, you're not going to be able to get a hospital bed. This is more likely in the rural places, but still, it's like that's pretty crazy numbers. And finally, like kind of a deep dive into how much we've raised. Oh, I can tell you a little bit about that. I don't want to break it too much, but we raised more than last year, which puts us in a pretty good spot. I will say that the Philippines on the whole, this is one cool number. Usually, when we started this report, when you looked at all the total capital that was deployed across Southeast Asia, all of it, like invested into like Indonesia, the Philippines, when we first started this report in 2020, I think was like 4% of all money deployed into Southeast Asia. By the time we studied it closely last November and looked at all the numbers, it was something like 19% last year. So more and more money is coming to the Philippines. And that's actually very exciting, right? Now, I would say that it's really, I try not to say it so much because I think I've spent the last 3 years saying the same words. It really is our inflection point. It's really the moment where we're actually like literally the stars of the show. Like people are looking at us and saying, hey Franco, or hey Philippines, you guys are really freaking interesting right now. We want to do more deals now. This is our moment. And it's no doubt, right? You look at kind of what's going on in other parts of the region. I'm not going to name names, but there are other startups from other parts of the region that are kind of blowing up in the news in not a good way. And not to name names. You can name it after when you're on the microphone. And thank God we haven't had that happen here yet. So this is our moment, and this is where I say this to a lot of people that go on stage before me. This is our moment where we cannot don't fuck it up. That's it. Don't fuck it up, guys. We have a great opportunity in front of us to raise a lot of money, to build great businesses, to affect change in this country. We also have a great opportunity to fuck it up. and I think I don't think those words come out in our venture capital report. Like, it doesn't say don't fuck it up, but that's kind of the messaging underneath all of it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, thanks for that. I just have a side question. I guess talking about the content Foxmont produces, when are we getting market maps of the Philippine landscape?
So what do you mean, like
Like, I mean the classic market maps you see from Sequoia, where it's like, oh yeah, here, this is like the generative AI landscape.
Yeah, we've tried. It's hard. It's hard. I mean, many other organizations have done that very well in the past. Right? Kubo has done it. I think Kickstarter's done it. Even Founders Launchpad, I think, has done it. We think that it's been covered by others as well. So maybe not necessary for Foxmont. Plus, I don't want to piss off anybody. Like, what if we forget a logo? I mean, I'm not trying to piss off anybody here. So anyway, there's a lot that's available, and we'll continue to try, but to get to 100% of all logos and people starting businesses is quite difficult.
I see. Yeah, thanks for that. So I guess moving on from Foxmont, I guess if you had to position yourself in any industry today, particularly to the Philippines or maybe even international, what would it be?
For Foxmont or for me?
No, it's like if you were 20 years old today, then position yourself.
Oh, if I was 20 and I was like founding a business and I wanted to like put myself in an industry. Man, that's a tough one. Let me think. So the easy answer, and this is the truth, but I'll give you another answer after this. The easy answer is that I don't think I'd be anywhere else. I love what I do, and I wish I had the opportunity to be 20 years old and do what I do. And have done it for longer. I've only done it for 6 years of my life, out of 40 years. So it's way too short. But I do feel like fund management, which is ultimately at the heart of what we do, is managing other people's funds, brings so much value to all different parts of who we work with. We bring so much value to our investors, like me. We bring so much value to our entrepreneurs. We bring value to the ecosystem. It's just like such a great place to be. Right. So the easy answer is I'm very happy where I am today, and I wish I started it earlier. The other answer I would say is that given if I was your age, let's say, and I was entering into the market thinking about businesses I wanted to start, I would start with places where I know that there's a need, and B where it would be easy to find support. Right. Today, again, just looking at the VC report, looking at where the money is going, what sort of businesses have been funded, what sort of support you're getting, fintech is definitely a place where you want to look closely, right? I mean, look at Pavel. You spoke to him. I mean, the guy freaking shows up out of nowhere. I don't know if did he share his history, by the way?
Yeah, he did. Just comes out of Russia and says, hey, Philippines.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I think I got a cold email from him, and I was like, who is this Russian? And I think it happened like right before the Ukrainian war, and I was like, what is this? What is this? I couldn't understand. I should have sat here and asked questions. Anyway, so you look at Pavel, you look at Bill Ease, you look at First Circle, you look at these businesses, and the reason I named these 3 businesses, which are all in different parts of fintech, because they raised like sick amounts of money last year. Massive amounts of money, because they were really answering a core problem about digitizing money and what to do with upon its digitization, right? Lending, invoice factoring, like all these different parts of it. Fintech is going to be continuing to be a hot space, right? For investments, for building businesses, for getting a lot of consumers. The other one that I would actually think about, and I kind of wish I did, is clean tech, so climate, right? This is a big hot word, I know, but the reality is that when we look at our portfolio and when we look today, like literally today, in real time, when we look at our portfolio, when we look at the amount of interest that's coming in from foreign funds, it's very clear that it's our clean tech, our climate investments that are getting the most interest. So those would be the 2 that I would hope that I would do at your
Yeah, thanks for that. So I guess before we move to the next question, I do want to go back to something earlier. You mentioned there's that certain startup, e-fishery. So I guess like that recent controversy in Indonesia, how do you see it would affect the Southeast Asian landscape, especially in terms of the deployment of funds to local venture capitals?
I mean, it's. I mean, what a crazy story, right? I mean, it's like juicy and crazy and insane, and I mean, it's just so hard to take it all in. But I mean, in summary, I don't know if everybody's up to date with what happened with e-fishery, but you know, there's only 2 regional startups that were called unicorns in the last couple of years. One of them was e-fishery, and the business itself, if you think about it, was like super sound, right? It was like super. In fact, even today, I think about it, it's like smart, right? You're basically installing IoT devices in ponds. You're figuring out like how the fish are behaving in the water, and you know, if they're swimming a certain way or they're acting a certain way, it tells you when they're hungry, so that you can deploy food to them quickly, so that you can actually grow them faster, you can get bigger. Basically, your yield, right, is bigger and faster as a farmer, and all you need to do is deploy this IoT device that then deploys food. And the other part of that business was that you also then sell the food to the farmers. Freaking amazing business. I was like, dude, this is so smart. What I didn't realize, and I don't think what anybody freaking realized, was that these guys were overstating their income by $700 million. $700 million. Like, that's insane. That's, you know, I told you, for example, that like the Philippines as an entire ecosystem has raised something like $1 billion over the last 3 years, right? That's what our VC report says. These guys are basically saying that they're making almost that much every year. That's how much we made, guys. We made like $800 million. Which then led to their valuation becoming, you know, over $1 billion. I think it was, I can't remember what the actual number was, but it was like in the high billions. And it turns out they were basically lying about the whole thing. The whole thing. I mean, they had some sales, but it certainly wasn't that much, and it wasn't worth $1 billion. So the bigger question is, okay, what the hell are these guys doing? Why would they do this? Okay, you know, we understand they're doing it because they want to raise money. And you know, like pretend that they're freaking billionaires, which by the way, the founder, if he had actually cashed in his shares, he would have been able to cash in like $150 million. Right? So that's probably what he was thinking. He's like, oh, if my company's worth $2 billion, I'm gonna be worth $150 million. Yes, crazy. So I'll just overstate my income by $700 million. But the bigger question lies in the governance of the business, right? Like the investors. What the hell? I mean, obviously, you know, some of these investors are very smart, and I talk to them as well. They know what they're doing, but the bigger question is, where was the hole here? There's obviously a hole somewhere. You cannot let $700 million go through without somebody missed it. Now, the heart of that actually then becomes: is governance a problem in this industry? One is governance a problem in Southeast Asia? But 2 is like, holy shit, if e-fisheries is, you know, this what sounds like a super sound business and is one of the only unicorns in Southeast Asia, and it's fake, like what is available in Southeast Asia? What are the businesses that can be $1 billion? Like, those are the fundamental questions. And does it affect the fundraising environment as a whole? Yeah, big time, right? I don't think we know yet how it trickles to the Philippines. It could go either way, by the way. It could be amazing, right? One way to think about it is like, and this is the way I like to think about it because I'm an optimist. One way to think about it is like, everybody goes, whoa, man, there's a lot of crazy news coming out of Indonesia, right? There's e-fishery, there's another one called Reina that just closed down. There's another one that I just got an email about that just closed down also. It's all these Indonesian businesses, and it's like, whoa, maybe we shouldn't put money in Indonesia anymore. What's the Philippines up to? There's that view, and I like that view. And I think that's really what's going to wind up happening. Because it shows, right? Like, even with the amount of people that come and visit me, like investors, like, first of all, the volume, a lot of them are starting to come, and it's only February. And second is like the questions like, oh, I'm hearing so much more about the Philippines. Tell me more. What can we deploy to? I even had one fund, the third Japanese fund, that came to me. They're like, Franco, I need to deploy. I have to deploy to the Philippines within 8 months. He's like, who are your deals? And he's like super aggressive, follows up with me every week about who can he invest in. We've never had that happen before. And that's most likely because Indonesia is just not that hot anymore for all the underlying reasons. Right? But the other way to look at it is like, there's already a lot of questions around Southeast Asia as a market. Just as a market, right? It's like, and it's always the same question. Where are the exits? Who's buying businesses? Who is, IPOing? That is something that nobody has an answer for right now, right? And if that is not answered, if there's no good answer to that, then it really does affect the funding environment for everybody. For me, to get more LPs, and then thus for the underlying portfolio companies, because I can't deploy anymore. It really starts at that. But I was just having a conversation with Tommy and Simon earlier about this exact topic before I came down here. And to me, one strong story that we all have to follow is actually GCash's. So GCash has indicated that they might IPO, thinking about it. The Ayalas are like, yeah, maybe. GCash is like, yeah, we've hired people. The Ayalas are like, I don't know. GCash is like, yeah, we're gonna do it. And so we're getting mixed messages. But if GCash can actually list in the Philippines, I mean, that's like, it like changes everything. Because then all of a sudden, like, that question, where's the exits? Gone. But there, it's GCash, no call. They raised $1 billion right there, right? This question of like, can the Philippines sustain a unicorn? Gone. Well, there is $1 billion. I mean, they're worth $5 billion. Gone. It's a question of like interest in the Philippines. Gone. Because you have all these institutional and retail investors that bought GCash shares in public listing. So it means so much to all of us. And I would actually, as a retail investor, I will literally buy GCash share just to make this thing pop myself.
Yeah, thanks for that, Franco. Super cool to hear that. And well, I guess to like one last question, and maybe we can have a quick Q&A. If you had to give any advice to someone I guess 20 today on like what skills to develop and how to approach their career, what would you give?
I had this whole speech last week with the high schoolers. Funny enough, I think it applies very well here too. I graduated with an English degree. I graduated with an English degree and an international relations degree. I thought I was going to be either a journalist or like a diplomat, or something related to like government. And little did I know that I would go into operations, that I would do all these different things. I mean, the long story is like you just kind of have to have faith in yourself, right? And know that you might not wind up where you want to be, but you're definitely going to wind up where you're meant to be. There's all these different parts of my life that I just explained to you all that kind of led up to the moment where I decided that like fund management was where I wanted to be, right? And one of them was simple, right? I told you guys I was doing this international sales job. I went to school in the US, I lived in Washington, DC, all these different things. And actually, what was that skill set that I realized I gained only afterwards, not even like as I wasn't even planning it. Only afterwards, I realized that one of my strongest skill sets is actually communication. The fact that none of you are asleep right now, I think is kind of a testament to that. Like that I can actually speak and speak different people's languages. In other words, like you could be 20 years old, or last week you could be 15 years old. Later this afternoon you could be 65 years old, and I will be able to effectively communicate what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to pitch to somebody, right? And that was actually a very strong skill set that is necessary, who knew, in fund management, because people need to know how I'm spending the money, how I'm investing the money. People need to know, if I'm raising money from them, how I intend to invest the money. From founders that are talking to me, they need to know what kind of support I can give them. This is skill sets that I didn't know, that I was gaining throughout my lifetime, right? But practically speaking, so again, the big message there, trust. Just trust yourself, trust that the world will come together for you based on how you develop your own skills moving forward, and you'll land where you're going to land, right? But practically, like within Foxmont, for example, what kind of skill sets do you need? You know, Foxmont is broken up into 3 different main teams. One is investments, the second is portfolio management, and the third is value creation. And actually, it's quite clear on each side what they do, right? So on the investments team, they're the guys, I call them the tip of the spear. They're the ones that actually meet with the startup founders. They look at the projections. They understand, they kind of like go through the Excel files and kind of understand the numbers and the assumptions that are made. And they're the ones that kind of work with the founders about these assumptions. That's clearly a finance skill set. You need to have finance. You need to study it, you need to go through it. You need to understand how people assume things and the way that their business is going to grow. I have a portfolio management team that's after we invest. They're the guys that give support to, I don't know, like we have to report to our LPs about how they're performing. So my portfolio management team manages the performance and watches over the performance. That is an accounting role. And why? Because this is historical. So these guys our portfolio is actually reporting to us how they performed last quarter. And I need my portfolio management team to actually go through that and say, okay, yeah, cool, this is the right place to spend your money, right? And then finally, we have the value creation team, and they're probably the most public part of Foxmont. It's Bea and Clara, and they are the ones that basically help create more value for our portfolio. So it's like the connections, right? The connections between our founders and other founders, right? Giving events, the venture capital report is down. That to me is more like a marketing role, right? And actually both of them have a deep marketing experience as well. So those are the types of skill sets you want to develop if Foxmont is where you want to wind up, or any fund management team. Now, on the manager level, like what I do, fund manager level, a lot of that is just really identifying, you have to be super at something, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think I explained that before. I had Delmer, my partner, who's really a fund manager, and he's like a finance whiz. And then I've got Jesse, who's the industry god, I'll call him. And then you've got me, who's kind of knows everybody, and can fundraise quite well. And from there, you've got the formula for fund. Please don't start a competitor, by the way. Just join us.
Yeah, thanks for that, Franco.